Hey, hi. Welcome back to another monthly Q&A where I take your questions and talk about pretty much whatever you guys want. I take these questions from Patreon and the YouTube community posts. Like I'll post there and say, hey, give me some questions. And you guys gave me a bunch. So let's just jump right in. It's going to be a mess. Simone Rexa asks, what are your personal thoughts on Minecraft? Have you ever played it for a longer time, like having your own world where you spent a bunch of hours or played online mini games or something? I just want to know if Minecraft and other sandbox games similar to that are something you like. Dude, the reason I never finished college is because of Minecraft. Like I was in the back of the class having like running like one of the shitty alphas or betas on like my hacked MacBook, that I had Windows on, and the MacBook was just screaming. And I'm in the back of the classroom in college and I'm just playing Minecraft endlessly. I was so hooked on Minecraft back in the early days. I followed all the community updates. I was like in that community. I had days where I would be playing it and then I'd look and the sun would come up because I just played through the entire night. You ever have games like that? Minecraft was one, and it's crazy for me to say that because of like where it started and now it is. It's like, it feels like it didn't even happen, but that was a thing. I don't really super dig a lot of sandbox games like that. But that one in particular just really clicked with me. Viago Tanega asks, what's your take on the smaller heatsink in the revised PS5? I have some friends that actually made that video, the Austin Evans video. Shout out to them. I think that it is a thing. Obviously, it was like a pretty, a lot of people have kind of debated the test and how you can get the temperatures and stuff like that. I do kind of agree with the mindset that it's like, yes, where technically it might be not as good, very, very technically, barely. It doesn't matter to anything. It doesn't matter to performance. It doesn't matter to your experience. So that's it. I mean, it's a fun video, and I like interesting little breakdowns like that, and I like pointing out little tiny differences and things, and clearly a lot of people do because a million people watch those videos and they go crazy. I just think that, like, don't take the headline and run with it and freak out. But that's what everybody does now anyway. Spicy Nugget asks, do you think when you're older, you'll stop playing games as a hobby and a job? No, never. The whole reason why I got into this, or I started trying to do this, was because I was like, what am I going to do with my life, man? You know, when you're like 17 and smoking a cigarette and freaking out. That was me. And I wasn't smoking a cigarette, but metaphorically. Video games have never gone anywhere. Video games have always been a constant in my life, more than anything. People, health, things, money, anything, mental state, anything, everything changes. But video games were always there for me, and I've always played them, and I never had like a break or like a lull where I didn't play a lot of video games. So that's why I jumped into this. So it's always going to be a thing in my life. Always. Eventually, yeah, like, will I stop playing games as a job? Yeah, that's how it's gonna go. This ship can only sail for so long, but I will never stop playing. Andrew on Patreon, thanks for having my back, man. He asks, what's your gaming PC setup like? I love seeing people's different choices in peripherals and layouts. It's a mess. I'm very proud of my current build. My current build is a very small form factor build. I think I have a picture of it. I'll show it on screen here. People thought it couldn't be done, and I did it. I crammed a 2080 and a pretty damn good i7 into this thing, plenty of storage, no heat problems. That was a lot of fun. That I really kind of challenged myself with that build. So I'd like to give myself a little street credit here. I use a Vortex Race 3 keyboard with cherry brown switches. It's kind of like the basic mechanical keyboard, but I like it. I like the way it feels. I like the way it looks. A mouse, I kind of just use a cheapy freebie mouse I got. I know. And I have a pretty good LG monitor. It's like that mix. It's at 1440, but with HDR. Very happy with it. That's newer. But I also bounce around a lot. Sometimes I have it hooked up to a monitor. A lot of the times I move my whole PC and I hook it up to my TV, and I enjoy playing a lot of games on my LG CX. Because I think that's like the pinnacle for games. So I like sitting on the couch and playing games. As much as I am a PC gamer, I enjoy the couch big time. So I do that. And then I also have a gaming laptop that I use. I actually use that a lot more here at the office. It's an Asus thing. They all have like crazy laptop names. But my actual setup in terms of like, LEDs and a nice chair and like a cool mat, all that stuff, it's pathetic. I just literally am focused on the games. The hardware and the games on the screen. Richard asks, play any instruments or anything? Any other hobbies? I actually do. So in school, I played the saxophone in band. I was second chair. by the way. Not first, but thank you. Also, I know how to play guitar. I don't really pick it up anymore, but I can fairly competently play guitar. I've always wanted to get back into it, but I just haven't in a couple of years. Rajdeep asks, do you think the days of experimental gameplay loops and overhauling of set game design are gone, and now we more focus on if a game looks more pretty or not, with the same kind of mechanics in every game series and franchises? And do you think that gameplay experiments are now only priority of the indie game industry? No. I think this is an ongoing problem. I think that we've been having this debate for a long time. This isn't new. I remember reading magazines and all of them focused on big flashy graphics, and you'd see screenshots of incredible games that never actually looked like that when you played them on your TV. But there was always a conversation of like, it's not about just the graphics, right? And so I think it's like a pendulum that's always going back and forth. I do think that a lot of bigger companies are taking less risks, like the big ones, like Activision, Call of Duty Vanguard is another Call of Duty. But then you have stuff like Deathloop. Deathloop is incredibly experimental. When you break down how the game actually flows and the way it's structured, it's a huge risk. And as much as when I finally went to the preview thing for Deathloop and I sat down and they explained it to me exactly how it works, I was like, people aren't going to buy that, but it's awesome. So I respect that. And I do think a lot of indie games do try some really cool stuff, but I think there's still room for weird concepts like Death Stranding. A lot of people shit on Death Stranding, but at least it's weird and different. Lucian says, Batman Arkham City will be turning 10 years old this October. He says, I feel so old now. How was your experience with Arkham City, and how does it feel knowing that this is approaching a decade anniversary? Incredibly influential game. It's also my favorite Batman Arkham game. I think that it encompassed everything I wanted from Batman. As much as I actually like some of the story things in Arkham Knight more, specifically with the Joker, I thought Arkham City was incredible front to back because it took the Arkham formula that I fell in love with Arkham Asylum and blew it out and gave you Batman kind of flying around a city, which is what I wanted to experience. That plus getting a shit ton of awesome villains, incredibly well represented as a big, huge Batman fan. Also, the ending, I think there's not often times where an ending makes a game. A lot of times an ending for a video game is either they stumbled into it, or it sucked, or it was all right, or it was just a big twist. I think in terms of just Batman storytelling overall, the way Arkham City ended is it just makes the game that much better. Single Player Gamer asks, Yakuza or Shenmue, and why? So back in the day, I rented Shenmue 2 at Blockbuster, and I was blown away by it. I thought it was incredible. I thought it was the next generation of things, and it kind of ended up being that. But we've gotten, remasters of Shenmue. We've got Shenmue 3, and we're going back to it. I prefer Yakuza. Obviously, they're different angles of things, they're different approaches. It's really just kind of two Asian games. But in terms of if you want to distill them both to man walking around a city and doing random bullshit and occasionally fighting, if you want to call that a genre, I like Yakuza so much. Or Yakuza. Sorry, I always pronounce it wrong. On Patreon, Bradley Denny asks, and shout out to him for having our back on Discord and stuff like that. What are your best practices when it comes to writing videos? I know you usually work with rough scripts. Any methods or tricks that you always come back to? So for me, yeah, I do a lot of bullet points. I started this by just talking. So I've tried to keep that going with Game Ranks. Obviously, a lot of Game Ranks videos get more complicated, and you are going to need some writing. But when it comes to full writing, what I try and do is just lean on that English class mentality where you need to have an intro, things need to flow together and transition together, and then seamlessly kind of wrap up into a nice conclusion. That's it. And what I also try and do is if I run out of not poetic, but if I run out of things to say to describe about this lovely game, it's amazing. If I run out of words or ways to make it compelling to explain why I like a game or why I don't like a game, I also try and then lead into more explanation of what the game is and go deeper in that so that you can still get value out of the video either way, be it opinion or explanation. And then that's how I kind of keep it balanced. Captain Pigo asks, and I love that name, how do you feel about the Tom Clancy games like Splinter Cell, Rainbow Six, Ghost Recon? Also, have you played Rainbow Six Siege in 2021? Because if not, I recommend hopping back into it. I have not replayed it. At this point, what it's become seems like it's not really a game for me. I'm not a competitive player. But the Tom Clancy series, let me take you for a tale. Tale as old as time. I've been playing fucking Tom Clancy games since pretty much the beginning. I remember seeing Rainbow Six Rogue Spear on my uncle's computer. I didn't have a computer, and I was just blown away by the AI and just the slow tactical nature of it, and it just felt real. Then obviously I love Splinter Cell. I've literally been playing since close to day one, so I didn't have an Xbox at first, so I had to wait for the game to come on PlayStation 2, and I remember like that being like one of the first games I really pre-ordered and sat there and thought about. So there's that. Then also the Ghost Recon games. Played every single one of them. Loved them. Even the first one. I remember playing that on original Xbox, and it's just a reticle. There's no man on screen. And it was boring and slow and tactical, but I loved it. It was tense. And then from there, every single one got awesome. And then now they've kind of changed directions. I don't really know. I don't know. Also, for me, a lot of people, the Xbox 360, right? Like their defining game is like what? I don't know. Playing Halo 3 online or Gears of War or something like that. For me, it was Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Vegas. That is one of the games I got the most hardcore into on Xbox Live at the time. I actually like neglected my PlayStation for a couple of months because I was so hooked on Rainbow Six Vegas, and I had made friends online, and I had a good group in high school, and it was just so much fun. I also have like a weird like love affair with games that are first person, but then when you take cover, it goes to third person. It's like a weird thing that I just really like. I don't know. Ajinkya asks, here's a stupid question. How do I convince my parents that a PS5 is not a waste of money? How can you explain the value in gaming consoles to someone who doesn't play games? I'd say it's harder now than ever. This is tough, man, because it's like the Xbox Series X and the PS5, their game lineup, if you want to just look at like raw games that you can go out and buy just for these consoles, it's still pretty low. It's early in the console generation. So, it might be hard to convince your parents to buy you a console and just like 3 games and then that's it. As I've gotten older and like thought back, I realize more and more now that like some parents really just feel the way they feel. They're stuck in their ways, and they hear what they want to hear. And with kids talking to them, it's really just kids talking at them. So it's hard. I'd say, and I've told this to my brother and sister with certain things that they've wanted, make it irrefutable. I'm talking hammer them. Like, be a lawyer. Make a PowerPoint presentation and give yourself inarguable facts about it. Be like, Mom and Dad, it will increase my happiness this much, and my grades will go up this much. Like, give them goals, objectives, actionable things, and then maybe you can get a PS5. Hugo.22 asks, do you ever get tired of statements or claims made in the gaming community? If so, what are these statements? Boy, how much time do you have? I want to focus on one. Specifically, people that come at me and say, there's no good games. There hasn't been a good game this year. I hear it every year. I hear it years where there are undeniably fantastic games released. It's not true. Like it's not true that there's no games that don't release. There maybe aren't any games that you've played that you like. People need to separate. You know what I mean? Look, if you only buy 3 games a year and it just so happened, luck of the draw, you didn't like any of them, that's unfortunate, and I get that. I've been there. Many of us have been there. But take a second and look around and see that there are other people enjoying other games. So like your bias is showing. Like you can't say that there are actually no good games released. It's just a matter of your taste. If there are new games releasing and there are groups of people out there enjoying them, that's how it is. So I feel like you can't just come out and say that. And I also feel like if anything, it's kind of doing a disservice to gaming and dunking on people that are enjoying a new game that is releasing. Do you know how many games release every year? It's not just a Ubisoft game, a Call of Duty game, a Battlefield game, this game, an Xbox exclusive, a PlayStation exclusive. There's so much more. So every time I hear that there's no good games, I take it personally. Victor asks, what canceled or abandoned games were you most excited and ultimately sad for? If you watch Game Ranks, you've probably heard this like 1,000 times because I just push that agenda in those videos. 2 things. Star Wars 1313, obviously. Really so many Star Wars projects that like started to get off the ground and then didn't. The Amy Hennig's involvement with certain things. It just all is a bummer. I'm glad things are kind of starting to turn back around, but that was rough, man, hearing 1313 get canceled and then hearing that it was a Boba Fett game, that was like extra salt in the wound. Ugh. The other one was Prey 2. Now, Prey was a weird game, a weird sci-fi first-person shooter, and then they were making a sequel that was totally different, and you were a space bounty hunter, man. And it was basically kind of like Jango Fett the game. I'm not talking really Boba Fett, I'm talking like specifically like Jango Fett in Coruscant, hunting down dudes, like hover car chases. Like, it looked like that type of game. And it was so cool. The trailers, the little bits of gameplay we got, everything was so exciting. They were marketing this game really well. I was so in. And then it slowly started to fizzle out and disappear. And then eventually, years later, was revived, and we got that other Prey game, which is fine. It's pretty cool. It's creative. A lot of people really like it, but I really wish we got that other one, man. Elijah asks, a question is about progression and loot systems in video games. They're in a lot of games now, usually in the form of colored or numbered loot, and act as an understandable and natural loot progression. Yet I feel like they make games feel very samey, and have always wondered how they could evolve. I always thought Fable 3's system of having weapons that evolve based off your actions and how you chose to play the game is a great example of how to do this. So my question was, what are some progression or loot systems that stuck out to you, and how do you think developers could continue to evolve them? I do agree with you. A lot of times now when I see colored loot systems, especially when it's in a game where it didn't previously have them and now they have that, sometimes I go, okay, it's another one of these. I don't mind loot being simple, really. I like the way Elder Scrolls games have always handled them. I guess you could say most recently Skyrim, sure. Straightforward, simple loot. I also like your example with Fable, with the evolving weapons and stuff like that. I've always enjoyed stuff like that. I really enjoy progression systems where the more time you put into it, the better your character gets, be it using a weapon or doing an ability, stuff like that. There's a lot of games that do that. I also like weirder things like age progression. I like the idea of your character getting stronger, and you also feel like they're progressing either in a story or just as your own created character. I love games where by the end of the game, not only are you like a leveled badass, but like you look like a badass. And I don't mean you just necessarily get the coolest armor, but like you look more grizzled. There's only certain specific games that do shit like that. Even stuff like Sifu. Part of the reason why I'm excited about that new game Sifu is that your character ages every time, seemingly, you lose a fight. And I just think that's cool. But in terms of loot, I do think that it's hard. There's only gonna be so many ways you can rethink the way loot systems work. So I think it's gonna be a lot of the same stuff for a while, and then every so often a new game comes that kind of innovates and finds something a little different, and the whole thing explodes and we get new stuff. I'm just waiting for that. Omar G asks, was there anything in media that really spooked you as a kid? For me, it was the TMNT suits in the first live action outing. Could never look at those teeth for years. Yeah, that's a good one. For me, two things come to mind. Number one, I was a kid and I remember like having a cold, and you remember like being sick as a kid on like cold medicine and just kind of like being in and out of sleep. I remember waking up in like a sick haze and looking on the TV, and it was the original Swamp Thing, and it was a shot of him in the swamp, kind of like, and it was just really eerie to me. As a little kid, I couldn't tell it was like just a dumb rubber costume. And it shook me to my core. The other thing that as a kid always really spooked me, and I love the movie, but I always held the covers up at the end, was Who Framed Roger Rabbit with Christopher Lloyd. When I killed your brother! And his eyes are popping out of his face. Holy shit, that still freaks me out. Digital Reaper asks, do you like the show The Walking Dead? If so, are you going to watch the final season? This is a really interesting and personal one, because I think like a lot of people, I really love the Walking Dead comic. I was deep. I followed it for a long time, and then it kind of eventually lost my interest and kept going. The Walking Dead show came out. That first episode, and really the first season, but that first episode specifically was like art. It was fucking incredible. It was so good. And then for a while, that show was so good. And it did a really good job of like replicating the feel and the dread and the ugh of humanity in the comics, while kind of going its own way and shaking things up a little bit. And I was hooked, and I watched for many seasons, but like the comic, eventually just kept going, and I lost interest and it just kind of fizzled out. I'm very wary of things that just keep going forever, seemingly maybe to just, keep the train going, keep the money going. This is how it works. Money's got to be generated. But I don't know, man. I really love things that just end. Breaking Bad just ended. Better Call Saul knows the story it's going to tell. It's just going to end. And like, I can contradict myself too, because there are plenty of things that go on forever and I really like them. Like certain video game franchises, I could just take them forever. Star Wars, I still like Star Wars things. I just finished The Bad Batch. It's awesome. So there's certain things where it does just turn me off though if it keeps going. And The Walking Dead just happened to be one of them. Also, and this is like a teenager in me being like, it's mainstream, man. It's not cool. But like, The Walking Dead got so big that like my grandmother's like 75. She watches The Walking Dead. GRH asks, quite simply, you ever watch Roadhouse? Dude, the throat rip, the trach rip is still the craziest thing ever. Like, just like, what? Roadhouse is really awesome, though. He was in his prime, really putting the work in with some of those fights. It is just a rowdy movie. There's a lot of 80s movies that I go back and watch, and I'm like, why do people love this? Like, I recently watched Risky Business, and I just found it, like, weird and creepy, where it, like, I don't think that was the intention. I don't know. But then you watch stuff like Roadhouse or Point Break, or I'm going to the 90s now, but Speed, and they are just perfect masterpieces. So I digress. So that wraps another Q&A. At some point, there's so many questions, like I might have to split these into two, but this was a lot of fun. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for some of your questions really kind of pushing me out of my comfort zone. It's really fun. Thanks to you guys who watch. Thanks to you guys who support me on YouTube with the join button with memberships or on Patreon. Thank you very much. I definitely want to hear your own Q&A down in the comments. If you have a reply to some of my answers or your own answer to some of the questions that were asked of me, let me know. Let's talk about this stuff. It's fun. We're all cool here. So if you had a good time with me, you know, all you got to do is click the like button. I would really appreciate that. I'm Jake Baldino. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to me ramble over here. Subscribe because video games. Pizza's on me.